The sky above Seoul turned dark as massive shadows blocked out the morning sun. Commander Lee Taemin gripped the metal railing of the observation deck at Busan Naval Base. His knuckles white as he watched the alien ships descend. They moved slowly, deliberately, like giant predators that knew their prey had nowhere to run. The ships were unlike anything humanity had ever seen. They looked like enormous crystals, their surfaces reflecting and bending light in ways that hurt to look at directly. Some were as large as city blocks, others even bigger. They didn't make any sound as they moved through the atmosphere, which somehow made them even more terrifying. "Sir, we're getting signals on every radio frequency," Lieutenant Park Ji-won called out from her station. Her voice was steady, but Taemin could hear the fear underneath. All around the command center, sailors and officers worked at their computers, trying to understand what the aliens were saying. The alien message came through their speakers in choppy, mechanical English. The voice sounded wrong, like a computer, trying to imitate human speech. "Humans of Earth, you will surrender. Your resistance is futile. We are the Kelthera Empire. Submit, and your deaths will be swift." Admiral Kim Do-yeon stood at the main tactical display, his weathered face grim as he studied the positioning of the alien fleet. He had fought in 3 major conflicts during his career, but nothing had prepared him for this. 37 massive ships hung in Earth's orbit like vultures waiting for something to die. "How much time are they giving us?" he asked. 72 hours, sir," Gi-won replied, her fingers flying over her keyboard. The same message is being broadcast in every major city around the world. London, New York, Tokyo, Moscow, they're all getting the same ultimatum. Miles away in the underground command center, Colonel Han Mingi was coordinating with military bases across the globe. Phone calls and video conferences filled the air as officers from every nation tried to make sense of what was happening. The aliens had made their first mistake. She realized they had given humanity time to think, time to plan. She studied the satellite footage on her screens, watching the alien ships maintain their perfect formations. They were on parade, each vessel exactly the same distance from the others. No variation, no adaptation to Earth's defenses. It was almost like they were following a script. They fight like they've never had to actually fight, she said quietly to herself. At the DMZ, Captain Song Ji-hoon monitored the alien communications through advanced listening equipment. The same arrogant message was being repeated over in different languages, but the tone never changed. It was the voice of someone who had never been told no, never been denied anything they wanted. The aliens called themselves the Kelthara Empire. Everything about their behavior suggested they were used to easy victories. Their broadcasts didn't sound like military communications, they sounded like announcements. It's like they were simply informing humanity of what was going to happen. Back at Busan, Taemin watched more alien ships arrive. They came in waves each, group taking up predetermined positions around the planet. It was impressive, but it was also predictable. Every ship knew exactly where it was supposed to be, and none of them deviated from the plan. "Sir, we're getting reports from intelligence," Ji-won said, looking up from her console. "The aliens aren't just talking to us. They're broadcasting the same message to every satellite, every radio station, every communication device they can. Find it's like they want to make sure everyone hears them." Admiral Kim nodded slowly. "They want us to be afraid. They want us to see their ships and give up before we even try to fight." The strategy made sense from their perspective. Why waste time and resources on a real battle when you could win through intimidation? But the Kelthera had misunderstood something fundamental about humanity. Fear didn't make humans surrender, it made them angry. In command centers around the world, military leaders were coming to the same conclusion. Aliens had conquered other worlds before. That much was clear from their confidence. But those other worlds had apparently given up without a real fight. The Kelthara had never faced a species that would rather die fighting than live as slaves. Colonel Han received a call from the Pentagon. "What's your assessment?" the American general asked. "They're overconfident," she replied. "I think this is going to be easy. They've given us 3 days to surrender, which means they don't expect us to use those 3 days to prepare for war." The alien ships continued their slow, majestic dance around Earth. They were beautiful in their own way, but there was something cold about them, something that suggested their creators had never had to struggle for anything. They had the technology to cross the stars, the weapons to destroy cities. But they lacked something that humans had in abundance: the experience of fighting for survival. As the first day of the ultimatum passed, the Kelthara maintained their perfect formations, broadcast their demands, and waited for humanity's inevitable surrender. They had no idea that in bunkers and bases around the world, humans were preparing to teach them a lesson about the price of underestimating their enemies. The aliens had come to rule. But they had never learned that sometimes the prey fights back. When the aliens finally came down from their ships, they appeared in the middle of every major city on Earth at exactly the same time. Sergeant Yuminho had been waiting for this moment, hidden in an abandoned office building in downtown Seoul. Through his binoculars, he watched the Kelthara soldiers materialize out of thin air, their bodies shimmering into existence like ghosts becoming solid. The aliens were taller than humans, maybe 7 feet on average, with skin so pale it was almost see-through. Their eyes were the strangest part. They looked like drops of liquid silver, constantly moving and shifting. They moved with a grace that reminded Minho of dancers. Every step perfectly balanced and controlled. What struck him most was their confidence. These beings walked into the heart of Seoul like they owned it already. They set up their equipment in the middle of empty streets, not bothering to check buildings or secure their perimeter. They acted like they had never been shot. At before, all units, execute Plan Delta. Colonel Han's voice crackled through his earpiece. The explosions began exactly 30 seconds later. All across the city, carefully placed charges detonated simultaneously. The targets weren't the aliens themselves. They were the strange crystal devices the Kelthara had been setting up. Communication equipment, Minho guessed, watching as the alien's silver eyes widened in what looked like shock. Private First Class Choi. Soman was crouched behind the counter of a destroyed convenience store 3 blocks away. She had a clear view of a group of 6 aliens who were standing in the middle of the street, looking around in confusion. They were talking to each other in a language that sounded like wind chimes, but their body language was easy to read. They were surprised. They move like they're dancing, she whispered into her radio to her squad leader, but they don't know how to fight. It was true. The aliens moved beautifully, but they moved predictably. When the first sniper shot rang out from a building, across the street, all 6 aliens turned toward the sound in perfect unison. They didn't scatter, didn't take cover, they just stood there and looked. The second shot dropped one of them. The others finally started to move, but even then they moved in formation. They advanced toward the building where the shot had come from, walking in a straight line like they were on parade. Salman had never seen anything like it. The aliens' weapons were terrifying. They carried devices that looked like crystal sculptures, but when they fired them, beams of purple light would lance out and cut through concrete like it was paper. A single shot could destroy a car or punch a hole through a building wall. But having powerful weapons didn't matter if you couldn't hit your target. The Kelthara had apparently never fought anyone who hid from them before, so they would fire there. Devastating energy beams at the last place they had seen a human, not understanding that their enemies had already moved to new positions. They fought like they expected their opponents to stand still and wait to be killed. In Busan, Captain Lee, Jae-sung was coordinating the defense of the harbor from an underground bunker. The aliens had landed near the port, probably thinking they could control the supply lines coming into the city. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a maze of shipping containers, cranes, and industrial equipment that provided perfect cover for human defenders. Team 3, fall back to position 7, he spoke into his radio. Let them follow you into the container yard. The aliens took the bait. A squad of Kelthara soldiers pursued the retreating humans directly into a kill zone where Lieutenant Bae Yuna was waiting with her sniper rifle. From her position on top of a cargo crane, she had a perfect view of the entire area. They're learning, she reported after taking down 2 more aliens. But they're learning too slowly. The Kelthara were starting to adapt. After losing several soldiers to sniper fire, They began to take cover behind vehicles and buildings. But even their improved tactics were clumsy. They moved like beings who had read about combat in books, but had never actually experienced it. What made it worse for the aliens was that they clearly weren't used to taking casualties. Every time one of their soldiers was killed, the others would stop what they were doing and gather around the body. They seemed genuinely shocked that their people could die in battle. The humans, on the other hand, had been fighting each other. For thousands of years, they knew how to move through cities without being seen, how to set traps, how to strike fast and disappear before the enemy could respond. They had learned these skills in wars against other humans, and now they were using them against invaders from the stars. By the end of the first day, the reports coming back to the Kelthara command ships were unlike anything they had ever received. Instead of celebrating easy victories, their ground commanders were requesting reinforcements and medical support. They were reporting casualties in numbers that their empire had never seen before. The aliens had expected to walk into empty cities and accept humanity's surrender. Instead, they found themselves in a real war against an enemy that refused to give up. Kelthara had conquered 47 worlds, but they had never conquered a world that fought back with such determination and skill. For the first time in their empire's history, the Kelthara were learning what it meant to be afraid. 6 months had passed since the aliens first landed, and everything had changed. The Kelthara no longer moved in their perfect formations during the day. Instead, they sent out small groups of soldiers, always looking over their shoulders, always expecting an attack. They had learned to fear the darkness, because that was. When the humans struck most often, Dr. Park Hyun-woo wiped sweat from his forehead as he worked in the underground laboratory. The room had once been part of Seoul National University, but now it was buried under tons of rubble and concrete. The only light came from the strange glow of alien weapons scattered across his workbench. "Look at this," he said to Colonel Han, who had come to visit the secret facility. He held up a crystal component that pulsed with blue energy. Their power source is incredible. It uses quantum energy, something we're only beginning to understand. But they made a mistake in their design. Colonel Han leaned closer, studying the alien technology. "What kind of mistake?" "Their shields work on a single frequency," Dr. Park explained, pointing to a series of measurements on his computer screen. They never thought anyone would figure it out. But once you know the frequency, you can punch right through their defenses. Dude, the irony wasn't lost on Major Kim Seongjin, who was testing the new weapons in a firing range deeper underground. Human rifles had been modified to fire alien energy beams, but with improvements the Kelthara had never thought of. The weapons were more accurate, more powerful, and more reliable than the originals. It's like they built these things to look impressive rather than to work well, he told his team. They never considered that someone might try to make them better. Captain Lee Ji-soo had been working around the clock, listening to intercepted alien communications. The Kelthara used a complex language, but human computers had cracked enough of it to understand the important parts. What they learned was fascinating. "They're not used to losing people," she reported to the command staff. "Every time one of their soldiers dies, it affects their whole unit. They don't have the mental toughness to handle casualties like we do." The aliens had expected to face creatures like all the others they had conquered, beings who would give up when they realized they were outmatched. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to get stronger with every battle. Every defeat taught the humans something new. Every victory made them more confident in the ruined city of Incheon. Sergeant Nam Hyok led a squad that would have been impossible to imagine 6 months ago. A university math professor fought alongside. A Navy SEAL, both carrying weapons that combined human engineering with alien power sources. A retired factory worker worked with a young computer programmer, sharing ammunition and covering each other's backs. The aliens are pulling back from the eastern sectors, Lieutenant Oh Sung-won reported over the radio. But they're not regrouping for another attack. They're just retreating. This was something the Kelthara had never experienced before. In all their previous conquests, they'd either won quickly or faced token resistance that collapsed after a few defeats. They had no experience with an enemy that refused to accept defeat. no doctrine for dealing with prolonged resistance. Dr. Kong Mi-kyung had spent months studying captured alien prisoners, trying to understand how they thought. Working with linguists and scientists, she had begun to piece together their psychology. What she found was both fascinating and encouraging. "They're not just surprised by our resistance," she told the Underground War Council. "They're genuinely confused by it. Their entire way of thinking is based on the idea that better technology always wins. They can't understand why we won't give up." The Kelthara had built their empire on overwhelming technological superiority. They would arrive at a world, demonstrate their advanced weapons, and wait for the surrender. It had worked 47 times before Earth. But humans had a different relationship with technology. They saw it as a tool to be improved. It's not a symbol of superiority. In hidden workshops across the globe, human engineers were not just copying alien technology, but making it better. They added targeting systems the Kelthara had never considered, improved the power efficiency of energy weapons, and created new tactics for using the technology in ways the aliens had never imagined. The psychological warfare was proving just as effective as the physical combat. The Kelthara had never faced a species that treated war as a learning experience. Defeat was analyzed, studied, and used to create new strategies. Every alien victory was temporary, because the humans would adapt and come back stronger. What confused the aliens most was that humans seemed to enjoy the challenge. Where other species had been terrified by Kelthara technology, humans were excited by it. They saw alien weapons not as instruments of their destruction, but as puzzles to be solved and tools to be improved. The war was changing both sides, but not equally. The Kelthara were becoming more cautious, more fearful, more uncertain. They had been forced to abandon their doctrine of overwhelming force and were struggling to adapt to guerrilla warfare. Meanwhile, the humans were becoming more skilled, more confident, and more dangerous with every passing day. For the first time in their history, the Kelthara were learning what it meant to be in a fair fight, and they were discovering that they didn't like it very much. The sun was just beginning to rise over the ruins of Seoul when the final assault began. Colonel Han Minji stood in the underground command center, watching dozens of screens that showed human forces moving into position. Around the Kelthara stronghold, the alien fortress rose from what had once been the Gangnam district like a massive crystal, its faceted walls reflecting the morning light in rainbow patterns. "All units, remember what we're fighting for," she broadcast to the assault teams. "Scattered throughout the city, we're not just fighting for territory. We're fighting to prove that having better weapons doesn't make you better people." The fortress had been the center of alien operations in Korea for months. It was their most heavily defended position, protected by energy shields and guarded by their best soldiers. But the humans surrounding it were no longer the same species that had first faced the Kelthara invasion. They had learned, adapted, and grown stronger. Captain Song Ji-hoon strapped himself into the pilot seat of a captured alien fighter, its controls now modified with human interfaces. The ship felt strange. Under his hands, too smooth, too perfect. The aliens had built it to be beautiful, but humans had learned to make it deadly. As he lifted off from the hidden airfield, he could feel the difference in how the ship responded. It moved with the same impossible grace as before, but now it had the aggressive edge that came from human modifications, engaging their air support. He reported over the radio, diving toward the alien defenders circling the fortress. The Kelthara pilots flew with technical precision, their formations perfect, and their maneuvers textbook correct. But they lacked something that humans had developed through thousands of years of warfare: the ability to think on their feet. To adapt instantly to changing situations, the alien pilots flew like they were following a script. When song broke formation and attacked from an unexpected angle, they took precious seconds to adjust. In air combat, seconds meant the difference between life and death. His first burst of alien energy fire took down 2 of their ships before they even realized they were under attack. On the ground, Lieutenant Colonel Yoon Tae-young coordinated the assault from a position in the ruins of a shopping mall. His forces moved with a combination of human, tactical flexibility an alien technology that the defenders simply couldn't counter. They used the aliens' own weapons against them, but with tactics the Kalthara had never seen before. They're not learning fast enough, he observed, watching through his binoculars as alien defenders tried to respond to the multi-pronged attack. They're still fighting like they expect us to give up and surrender. The Kalthara had built their fortress according to their traditional defensive doctrine: high walls, powerful weapons, and the assumption that attackers would come straight at them. But humans had learned centuries ago that the best way to attack a fortress was to not attack it directly at all. Instead, they attacked from multiple directions, using diversions and feints to confuse the defenders. The alien soldiers were brave enough, but they were fighting a type of warfare they had never encountered. They had conquered 47 worlds, but all of those conquests had been quick affairs. They had never faced an enemy that fought back with such determination and creativity. The fortress fell in 18 hours. When the last alien defender surrendered, it marked the first time in Kalthara history that they had lost a major military installation to a species they had come to conquer. The implications rippled through their command structure like an earthquake in orbit above Earth. The alien fleet received the news of the fortress's fall with something approaching panic. Admiral Park Sung-hoon, monitoring their communications from his command bunker, noted the immediate change in their transmission patterns. "They're arguing among themselves," reported Communications Officer Lee Haijin. Her headphones pressed tight against her ears as she listened to the alien chatter. The word impossible keeps appearing in their broadcasts. They're saying it over and over. The Kalthara had built their empire on a simple assumption that technological superiority was absolute. If you had better weapons, you won. If you had better ships, you conquered. They had never considered that adaptability and determination would be more important than having the best equipment. Major General Kim Youngman stood in the captured alien command center, studying the holographic displays that showed Kalthara positions throughout the galaxy. The technology was impressive, but what interested him more was what the displays revealed about alien psychology. Every position was marked with precise coordinates, every unit had exact orders, and every contingency had been planned for except one. They had never planned for defeat. "Sir," called out Sergeant First Class Lim Soyen from her monitoring station, "we're detecting movement in their orbital fleet. They're repositioning their ships." The aliens were preparing for something, but their rigid tactical doctrine made their intentions transparent to human military analysts who had learned to read their patterns. They moved like a chess player who only knew one opening, predictable, and vulnerable to anyone who understood their system. The fall of the fortress had changed everything. For the first time, the Kalthara were facing the possibility that they might actually lose this war, and they had no idea how to handle that possibility. The Kalthara fleet was leaving Earth, but they were doing it all wrong. Admiral Kim Do-yeon watched from the bridge of what had once been the alien flagship, now flying under human control. The retreating ships moved in the same rigid formations they had used when they arrived, but now those formations looked clumsy and desperate. "They're running," he said to his bridge crew, "and they have no idea how to run properly." The aliens had never retreated before in their long history of conquest. They had always been the ones forcing others to flee. Now faced with their first real defeat, they were making mistakes that any human military academy student would have spotted. Commander Lee Temin stood at the tactical display, watching the alien ships break orbit. Human engineers had spent months learning to fly the captured Kalthara vessels, and now a mixed fleet of human and alien ships was ready to pursue them. The irony wasn't lost on him. The aliens were being chased by their own technology, improved by human ingenuity. "Don't let them leave," he ordered his fleet commanders. "They came here to conquer us. They don't get to leave just because conquest became too hard." The human fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Earth's original warships had been upgraded with alien technology, while captured Kalthara vessels flew with human crews who pushed the technology far beyond what its original designers had intended. The aliens had built their ships to be impressive, but humans had learned to make them deadly. Captain Park Ju-won led a squadron of modified fighters as they chased the retreating aliens beyond Earth's solar system. Her ships could travel faster than light now, something that had been impossible just a year ago. The alien navigation computers had shown them the way to technologies that would have taken humanity centuries to develop on their own. They're heading for the Kepler 442 system, she reported back to the command ship. According to their own navigation logs, they have a colony world there called the Sara Prime. The Kelthara had made their final and most critical mistake. In their arrogance, they had brought detailed star charts of their entire empire aboard their invasion fleet. They had never considered that these charts might fall into enemy hands, because they had never imagined losing a war. Colonel Han Minji studied those star charts on the bridge of the lead vessel. The Kelthara Empire stretched across dozens of star systems, but their military records showed the same pattern everywhere: overwhelming initial attack followed by immediate surrender. From the local population, they had never developed strategies for prolonged warfare because they had never needed them. They've never faced a species that follows them home, she said to her staff. This is going to be a very unpleasant surprise for them. It's 3 months. Later, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace above the Sara Prime. The Kelthara colony world was beautiful, with purple oceans and silver cities that gleamed in the light of twin suns. But what interested the humans most was the complete lack of military defenses. The aliens had never fortified their own worlds because they had never expected to be attacked. Dr. Park Hyun-woo, now serving as the Chief Technology Officer of the Human Expeditionary Fleet, watched the alien world grow larger on the viewing screens. His teams had spent the journey learning even more about Kelthara technology, improving it in ways that continued to surprise their alien prisoners. Sir, they're broadcasting surrender offers, he reported to Admiral Kim. They're begging us to negotiate. Admiral Kim Do-yeon smiled, but there was no humor in it. Too late for that? They came to our world to rule us. Now they're going to learn what it means to be ruled by someone else. The human fleet moved into attack formation above the alien world. The Kelthara had taught humanity a valuable lesson about conquest. It was a weapon that could be turned against those who wielded it. They had shown humans how to travel between the stars, how to build powerful weapons, and how to locate their enemies across the galaxy. Captain Song Ji-hoon monitored the communications coming from the planet below. The alien cities were in chaos as millions of Kelthara evacuated their homes, fleeing to the countryside just as they had expected humans to do. The hunters had become the hunted. Sir, they're treating us exactly like they expected us to treat them, he reported. They're abandoning their cities and running for the hills. The irony was perfect. The Kelthara had come to Earth expecting easy conquest, but they had awakened something in humanity that they couldn't understand: the refusal to accept defeat and the determination to turn the tables completely. They had taught humans that conquest was possible, and now humans were better at it than they were. As the human fleet prepared for planetary assault, final transmission arrived from Earth. President Park Jin-woo's voice echoed through the command center, clear and determined. They came to rule. Earth came to end them. Make sure the galaxy remembers that lesson. The age of Kelthara dominance was over. The aliens had ruled dozens of worlds through fear and superior technology, but they had never learned to fight against an enemy that refused to stay beaten. They would learn what their own victims had felt, and they would discover that humans made far more dangerous conquerors than they had ever been. The age of human expansion had begun. The galaxy would never be the same.